The breakthrough began not with a bang, but with a pattern. In the cold, controlled silence of Earth's most advanced quantum laboratory, researchers noticed anomalies in dimensional scans, unusual fluctuations that defied existing models. At first, they dismissed it as background noise. But as more data poured in, one thing became increasingly clear. This wasn't random. A deeper, intentional structure was encoded within the distortions. It wasn't long before the signal emerged. Not a communication in any traditional sense. No words, no decipherable language. Just a rhythmic pulse, as if something out there were knocking. The frequency echoed across multiple dimensions, reverberating in ways no human technology had ever encountered. A pattern in the chaos, as beautiful as it was terrifying. Every quantum physicist, cryptographer, and computational linguist on Earth turned their attention to it. Within days, they all came to the same chilling conclusion. The signal was not of earthly origin. The scientific community buzzed with anticipation and fear. A race against time began to unravel the mystery. The UN convened an emergency summit as governments tried to understand what this could mean for Earth. Was it a greeting? A warning? A test? Public reaction was predictably chaotic. News cycles screamed headlines. Humanity's first contact? A portal to another world? Civilizations across the globe split into factions. Those who wanted to open the door, and those who wanted to weld it shut forever. Still, research pressed forward. The signal contained fragments, dimensional mathematics far beyond human understanding, but laced with symmetry that suggested intent. Even the most skeptical minds couldn't deny it anymore. Something intelligent was trying to be noticed. The media dubbed them the Dimensional Engineers, a name that stuck. Mysterious entities, manipulating space-time like architects of reality itself. What drove humanity was never just a pursuit of knowledge. It was a need to understand our place. That need fueled the construction of the dimensional aperture, a titanic machine designed to stabilize and expand the rift. The world superpowers pooled resources, burying rivalries for the first time in history. It was not just a scientific initiative. It was humanity's collective leap into the unknown. Ethicists, spiritual leaders, and philosophers began to weigh in. Were humans ready? Did we have the right to reach out? What if the engineers were hostile? Could we handle the consequences? But the momentum was irreversible. We had looked into the abyss and seen a reflection not of monsters, but of possibility. As months passed, the aperture neared completion. Built deep beneath Antarctica's ice, it was powered by a fusion core unlike anything seen before, designed to sustain stable access to non-Euclidean geometries. Teams of scientists, soldiers, and diplomats trained relentlessly, preparing for every possible outcome. Yet no one truly knew what would happen when the gate opened. Then came the day. The countdown began. Systems aligned. The signal pulsed stronger than ever. The dimensional veil shimmered, then parted. For the briefest moment, we saw through it. Not just light or shadow, but structures that defied logic, spiraling cities of impossible angles, celestial machines orbiting nothing, and towering forms that radiated intellect. It was only a glimpse. The rift collapsed almost instantly, but in that glimpse, everything changed. The laws we believed governed reality were shattered. The only certainty left was that we were not alone, and that whatever lay beyond, it was watching. What humanity had reached for was now reaching back. The aperture was stabilized again within weeks, thanks to improvements in real-time dimensional modeling. What had once been a momentary glimpse was now a narrow but sustained window into an alien framework. Yet as the portal solidified, so did the danger. The engineers responded, but not with fanfare or violence. Simply by stepping through. The being that emerged was no biological creature. It didn't walk, float, or manifest in any way we would call life. It was a construct of shifting geometry, fractal contours folding in on themselves, constantly changing, yet maintaining a form like a living equation. Every motion it made altered the physics of the space it occupied. Reality bent in its presence. Attempts to communicate were immediate and futile. Earth's most advanced translation software failed. Linguists, AI systems, and quantum coders fed every input they had, but nothing made sense. The being emitted sound, multilayer harmonics vibrating through subspace, but no discernible message could be extracted. It didn't speak. It demonstrated. When it reached out, it didn't touch. Instead, systems in the aperture began failing. Energy spikes, gravimetric warping, containment anomalies. A technician vanished in front of 50 witnesses, pulled into a fold that shouldn't exist. Chaos erupted. Security personnel attempted to isolate the aperture. In less than 2 minutes, the portal collapsed again, violently. The being disappeared. It left no trace behind but devastation. Panic returned with vengeance. Civil unrest surged as people demanded answers. Cities locked down. Internet blackouts rolled across continents to contain speculation. Wild theories took hold, ranging from interdimensional invasion to divine reckoning. Military installations surrounded aperture sites worldwide. Humanity didn't just fear what came through. It feared what might already be here. But amid the panic, progress continued. A breakthrough came not from the physicists, but from a neurolinguistic AI researcher in Lagos. Using an experimental language engine, the AI began interpreting the dimensional signals not as sound or code, but as intention. What humanity had mistaken as noise was actually emotional patterning, encoded in nonlinear time. The engineers, it seemed, were not being hostile. They were reacting to us like one might to a virus breaching sterile ground. Their trial was a test of our dimensional hygiene, not our aggression. We had triggered a defense mechanism, not an attack. Armed with this insight, humanity regrouped. A new effort was launched, not to force contact, but to adapt. A team of thinkers, physicists, artists, ethicists, and philosophers was assembled. They proposed a different path. Don't speak. Show. Let our actions communicate what our words couldn't. Construction resumed on a second, more refined aperture. This one would not just open a window, it would present a statement. A curated projection of human history, thought, ethics, and creativity. A museum of who we were, designed not to impress, but to express. It was humanity in its rawest form, war and peace, logic and emotion, chaos and order. As the second rift opened, no being stepped through. Instead, a structure formed within the void, a mirrored lattice of impossible geometry. The engineers were watching, listening through dimensions we couldn't sense. Then at last came a signal. It wasn't sound or words. It was a replication, an echo of our projection, but reassembled. They were trying to understand us. They were responding. The message came with a clear duality, welcome and warning. We were acknowledged as sentient, but still volatile, capable of creation and destruction in equal measure. The engineers would not stop us from exploring, but they would not rescue us if we erred. The gate remained open, but Earth would now be judged by what came next. And so, the choice was ours, to fear what we did not understand or to become worthy of it. The message wasn't just a test. It was an invitation. The engineers posed a challenge, not in words, but in consequence. A spatial cascade began around the aperture. If left unchecked, it would collapse the dimensional shell that kept Earth stable, fragmenting time and reality itself. This wasn't a threat. It was a puzzle, a problem embedded in physics, intention, and ethics, one that required understanding beyond logic. Humanity had no blueprint, no prior examples. But we had something else. Creativity. The crisis called for a response on the full spectrum of human thought. A global alliance was formed, not of nations, but of minds. Mathematicians, composers, architects, monks, code poets, and chaos theorists. People who had trained their entire lives to think not just differently, but dimensionally. The core of the engineer's trial was a shifting lattice, something that adapted to every attempted solution. Algorithms failed, brute force yielded nothing. But then, from an unlikely place, inspiration struck. A linguist noticed that the changes in the cascade mirrored the rhythm of a Sufi chant. Not a coincidence, but a clue. The lattice wasn't resisting analysis. It was waiting for recognition. It needed resonance. The key wasn't data, but expression, emotion. The paradox the engineers posed could only be resolved by aligning human meaning with abstract structure. For the first time in human history, science had to partner with art. A digital choir was formed. Every continent contributed. Music infused with equations, harmonics built from prime numbers and emotional waveforms, algorithms written like poetry. As the cascade neared critical instability, the signal was deployed. Not a weapon, not a firewall, a message. In the center of the aperture, the transmission played, notes and symbols forming recursive geometries in real time. The dimensional lattice pulsed, then stabilized. The rift contracted but didn't close. The cascade reversed. Humanity had solved the unsolvable, not through dominance, but through interpretation. The engineers responded not with applause, but with action. A new structure formed beyond the gate, a node within the engineers' network. Earth was being connected, not conquered, not elevated, but included. The engineers sent no emissary this time. Instead, they released data. Structures, theories, systems beyond our wildest imagination. Energy generation through paradox fields, disease eradication via frequency modulation, propulsion based on time asymmetry. Gifts with no strings, only one condition. Comprehension must precede application. This wasn't just a reward. It was a mirror. We had earned trust not by what we built, but by how we adapted, by how we collaborated across divides, across language, belief, and logic. In doing so, humanity revealed what made us truly unique. Not our strength, not our intelligence, but our ability to imagine a path where none existed. Earth celebrated, not with fireworks, but with unity. Schools rewrote their curricula. Philosophers revisited their assumptions. Engineers dreamed without limits. A renaissance ignited, not one of territory or conquest, but of understanding. Humanity had been tested not for survival, but for potential. The engineers had seen our wars, our greed, our flaws, but they had also seen how we rise, not in spite of them, but through them. Our imperfection was not a weakness. It was a soil where hope took root. In the quiet that followed, the portal remained, a silent testament to the moment when a species stepped beyond itself, not because it was ready, but because it chose to be. The years that followed marked a new era not just for Earth, but for its place in a greater dimensional ecosystem. Humanity was no longer confined to a single plane of understanding. The aperture became a beacon, a bridge not a conquest, but a curiosity. Scholars no longer asked if the engineers existed. Now they asked how to speak their language of motion, frequency, and form. The boundary between physics and philosophy blurred. The sciences evolved to accommodate concepts once considered mystical: spatial empathy, harmonic cognition, and moral calculus. These weren't science fiction. They were now part of the syllabus. But the most profound shift wasn't technological. It was cultural. Nations redefined themselves not by borders, but by how they contributed to the dimensional dialogue. Earth wasn't colonizing other realities. It was learning how to coexist with them. There were setbacks, of course, missteps, misinterpretations. A failed experiment in Iceland resulted in a localized time inversion. A child aged backwards for 11 minutes. Another aperture in Mumbai revealed a realm of pure entropy. A research team was lost. The engineers didn't intervene. They never had. Their silence was their lesson. Power means nothing without wisdom. That silence was humbling. It forced Earth to grow up. Treaties were rewritten. Weaponized research was outlawed. Profit took a back seat to purpose. When the third aperture was built, this time on the moon, it wasn't named after a nation or a scientist. It was named after a concept: resonance. It wasn't about who built it, but why. More dimensional structures appeared, not all by human hands. One formed above the Pacific, hovering in midair, a lattice of frozen light, visible only during deep sleep cycles. Another emerged inside CERN, phasing between states of matter and thought. Humanity began to suspect the truth. The engineers were not a species. They were a function, a role filled by countless civilizations across countless dimensions, those who had passed their trials, who now nurtured others to do the same. It was a network of guardians, architects of thresholds, mentors of those ready to ask the right questions. Earth was not special because it was first. It was special because it had endured, because when faced with the unknowable, it had responded not with war, but with wonder. The final message from the engineers came not in words or symbols, but as a moment, a synchronized pulse across every aperture. Time slowed, then briefly stopped. Every human, whether asleep or awake, saw the same vision. Earth floating not alone in space, but among others, dozens, hundreds, each unique, each radiant, all watching. And in that moment we understood. The test had never been about whether we could reach other dimensions. It had been whether we deserved to, whether we could enter not as invaders, but as equals, not as saviors, but as students. The apertures remain open now, not gates, but mirrors. They show us not where we are going, but who we must become to get there. And as humanity continues its journey into the dimensional unknown, one truth endures. We were not chosen by the engineers. We became them.